Welcome to my Action Research virtual poster presentation. This is Taylor Wright. My problem statement is, if students are not engaged within the classroom, then they will lack focus, motivation, and overall success. This is an important topic to me because it's an idea that I think is vital for all educators to keep in mind when they are teaching and planning for their lessons. As a student learning the ins and outs of the profession, and specifically throughout my teaching placements thus far, I've been very aware of when my students are actively engaged and how much more successful learning occurs when they are interested and excited about the content. It is vital for students to be engaged because engagement means that they are able to retain the information and lessons provided. My goal is for my future students to enjoy being in our classroom environment and to make the most out of their year of learning in my class, which is why I'm focusing my action research on the idea of active student engagement. My research questions are: how will I improve student engagement in the classroom? What strategies can I implement in the classroom to encourage active engagement with material? What can I alter or modify in my practice to ensure students remain engaged throughout lessons? How will student engagement impact our classroom environment? Some definitions I thought were important to clarify were active engagement, which is when students will be attentive during lessons. Their body language shows they're focused, paying attention, and interested in the content. They are not chatting with their peers or distracted by others. They are able to understand the task and information and also able to feel comfortable asking for clarification where needed. The classroom environment I defined as the atmosphere in the room where teachers and students learn. This is a co-created environment by teachers as well as the students, since they are all involved in that environment. I also thought it was important to define teaching strategies as the tools and techniques that teachers choose to utilize in their lessons. Looking into my literature annotated bibliography, my first article was titled "Using Children's Drawings to Examine Student Perspectives of Classroom Climate in a School Within a School, Elementary School." In this article, the researchers used an open-ended question to lead students' ideas. Each student drew a picture of the classroom on a typical day. The drawings were analyzed qualitatively using iterative process of coding. The researchers quantified the codes to investigate their research questions using categorical data analysis procedures. Some important findings were that a positive classroom environment leads to active student engagement, and a sense of community in the classroom aids children to feel more comfortable and therefore fosters a more positive academic environment as well. Excuse me. The research between teachers' implementation of classroom management practices and student behavior in elementary schools was my second article I looked at. The researchers studied 1,242 teacher-student dyads from 65 elementary schools across several districts in a southeastern state. The researchers observed the student-teacher interactions and engagement based on the teacher's classroom management techniques. Some important findings were that teachers who have positive behavior management skills and techniques also have a more engaged class. Student disruptions occur when teachers do not have control in the classroom behavior and therefore less active engagement occurs. The third article I looked at was called "Physically Active versus Sedentary Academic Lessons, a Dose-Response Study for Elementary Student Time on Task." In this study, the researchers examined students aged 7 to 9 and their engagement pre- and post-lesson, with some lessons being active and others being sedentary. They noted whether the time on task was higher or lower during each lesson. Some important findings were that students are more actively engaged in lessons that involved or are following a time of physical activity. Physical activity results in more time on task activities than a lesson which involves sedentary movement or lack thereof movement. Looking deeper into these articles, into my literature summary, My first article, the researchers looked at the idea of school climate. So all stakeholders in the school, for example, the teachers, students, administration, the parents, and also they looked at the social norms within the school. They analyzed students' drawings of positive classroom environment to find their results. The results indicate that a positive classroom and school climate, positive relationships between stakeholders and norms leads to increased engagement and productive learning. So this article connects to my research questions because knowing that if I can help create and foster a positive classroom and school environment, students will have a better sense of community and belonging, which ultimately leads to their desire to be and remain engaged within the lessons that I teach. Looking more deeply into Article 2. So this article was talking about the classroom and behavior management skills. So the researchers found that active engagement is a predictor of success, and off-task or disruptive behavior is a predictor of failure, specifically for students with emotional or behavioral disorders, since these students are often those who cannot focus in class and are removed or relocated to other places within the school, for example, the principal's office. When these students are off task or removed from this typical class environment, positive learning cannot occur. The more the teacher is engaged in the class through lessons and social interactions, the more the students will feed off this energy and want to be actively engaged and succeed. Active supervision in the classroom, especially during small group instruction, leads to more control over class management, more respect from students, and therefore more active engagement in the curriculum. So this article connects back to my research questions because it helps me to understand that if I as a teacher can implement good classroom management techniques in the classroom and have control over my students' behavior, they will respect me and be more attentive and actively engaged in my lessons. Article 3 on physically active lessons or physical activity within our school day. Our researchers found that adding a variety of lessons is essential to student engagement, which can be enforced through physically or mentally active programs. When a lesson is too sedentary or repetitive, it does not spark any new interest. Therefore, students get disengaged and off task. Implementing varied programs such as physical games or new and exciting ways such as a competitive math question game show will help students stay interested in the content and wanting to learn more. Relating this back to my research questions, students need to be constantly stimulated. As a teacher, if we notice that our students are getting distracted or off task, they are probably antsy and have been sitting for too long during the same task. To keep them engaged, we should recognize when our students need a movement break or when they need a new stimulus to get them back in the game and back to a state of interest and content. Here is my research action plan. So I will be looking at various data sources to conduct my research. I will be conducting teacher interviews, principal and learning resource teacher interviews as well to focus on my first couple questions. So how will I improve student engagement in the classroom and what strategies can I implement in the class to encourage active engagement with material? So I will be looking to see what strategies teachers, principals, and learning resource teachers use and what PD events they've gone to where they've learned different strategies that they've implemented in the class or with the children, and what they think is helpful to their student engagement. Looking at my second question, what can I alter or modify in my practice to ensure students remain engaged throughout lessons? I will be conducting student interviews and questionnaires, and also I will be asking teachers to keep journals and documentation of their daily or on a weekly basis of when they think that their students are most engaged and what activities they just implemented, what strategies they implemented, just so I have some qualitative data to look at and learn from. For the student interviews, I'll ask students questions about when they feel they're most engaged in their lessons, what their teacher does to keep them engaged, when are they least engaged, and what are some things they suggest or wish their teacher would do to make the lessons more interesting and therefore help them to stay on task. Looking at my last question, how will student engagement impact our classroom environment? I'll be conducting student questionnaires and also looking more at teacher observations. So I'll observe students' overall impact in the classroom when they're engaged and disengaged, opposed to when looking at when they're less engaged in the class. So I will observe this, and then the student questionnaires. How do students feel when they're engaged in a lesson? Do they have a good sense of community and respect? And do they notice a difference in their peer-teacher interactions once they are engaged? Okay, so looking at triangulation, validity, and reliability. So to ensure validity and reliability in my study, I would use interviews, questionnaires, and observational documentation as sources to collect the data in my research. By conducting interviews with teachers, students, principals, and learning resource teachers and analyzing records and teachers' documents through observations, I will receive a plethora of detailed and valid information that could really enhance the thoroughness of my study. The information may provide me with new insights and detailed explanation of when students are most engaged and when they might be most engaged during that time. To ensure reliability in my study, questionnaires will provide me with adequate results of specific questions I would like to be based on my research questions. The data will allow me to see any similarities and crossovers between questions and ensure there's enough data supporting or not enough data supporting a certain area of study that will encourage me to look further into. Students, teachers, principals, and learning resource teachers are involved. They can recognize when active engagement occurs. The Interviews will be conducted during class time, observations and documentations will occur during or after lessons, and questionnaires will take place when students are in their class. To ensure confidentiality, I will make sure that there is adequate paperwork given out. Students will have their parents sign the form. Teachers do not need to use their names when I look at their documentation, or during interviews as well. They don't need to use their names if they would like that confidential. Looking at a timeline, my interviews will be 30 to 45 minutes long, 20 minutes long with students. The questionnaires will be administered to the participants during February and March. The interviews will be during February and March as well. Questionnaires will be 2 to 3 pages maximum, and my observations and documentations, I would like the teachers to observe during mid and January to the end of March. Looking at my data and analyzing it, recordings will be listened to and transcribed. Findings will be highlighted. I'll go through and look for common themes. The same goes for questionnaires and my observations as well. I will take notes and also find themes. Looking back at my research action plan, I found some commonalities. So the action research would support my teaching in various ways. It would help me as an educator to implement strategies and activities in the classroom to ensure my students are actively engaged and learning to the best of their abilities. From my findings, I would discover what techniques teachers use in the classroom and spark the supportive students' interest in the content in my subsequent lessons. It would help me to get students' perspective on the matter. If there's certain times in the day, certain activities, or certain accommodations that help them stay focused, this will be interesting to know. I'll be able to see what tasks or activities they are not motivated in to complete and what would possibly help these tasks be more bearable or interesting. I would notice what makes them more successful in the classroom and what I could do as a teacher on a daily basis to ensure they are benefiting from my classroom management skills and curriculum implementation ideas. Finally, I would be able to notice if active engagement truly has a positive impact on the classroom environment. I would recognize whether a positive, welcoming, comfortable classroom environment has a positive impact on students' active engagement. These findings would very much help me in my future classroom because as a new teacher approaching the work field, this information and these insights would be extremely beneficial to my practice. The information would ensure that students are as successful as they can be, and I'm preparing them to the best of my abilities for their next years of study.